Are you a fan of the classic Western TV series The Lone Ranger? It was one of the best TV shows produced in America and one that showed us heroism, friendship, and loyalty, which are qualities we all love to see in modern TV shows. Do you know how the show got its start? Do you know how it became popular? Stay tuned to learn about huge details you likely missed in The Lone Ranger. How the Lone Ranger began. Westerns are a popular genre in America. It's perhaps the genre that best represents the American spirit, exploring the unknown, being courageous, and standing up for what's right. The Lone Ranger was the epitome of the American ideal. The Lone Ranger was a surviving Texas Ranger who roamed the land with his sidekick Tonto to assist those in danger who needed rescuing. The show ran from 1949 to 57 and remains one of the most popular American TV shows of all time. But how did it get started? As history tells us, it all began from the mind of Fran Stryker. Before we tell you more about some of the details you missed in The Lone Ranger, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First for more. Fran Stryker and George W. Trendle. Fran Stryker was one of America's most notable radio and comics writers. He began his radio career working as a radio announcer and later began working as a continuity writer. As he rose in the ranks, he soon penned his first radio script, a biography of American songwriter Stephen Foster. He soon began writing scripts in a variety of genres, showing a natural flair for penning westerns. He soon became a freelance writer and tried selling his scripts to various radio stations across the country. His fate changed when he met the famous radio producer George W. Trendle. In the early 30s, Fran Stryker created the character of the Lone Ranger, with the early scripts being reworked from an earlier series called Covered Wagon Days. There was a bit of a conflict between Fran Stryker and George Trendle as to who was the creator of the character. Stryker later went on a popular TV show called To Tell the Truth to confirm that he in fact was the creator of the show. Despite this conflict, the two formed a partnership to create a radio series called The Lone Ranger. This soon became one of the most popular radio series of all time. The duo of Stryker and Trendle became household names in the radio industry. The character of the Lone Ranger became one of the most popular characters among fans of westerns. The Lone Ranger was a representation of the American hero we all admired. The TV series. As the character became more popular, he made appearances in comics and a few films written by Fran Stryker, but he reached a wider audience with the Lone Ranger TV series. In that series, a group of 6 Texas Rangers are shot at. The sole survivor becomes known as the Lone Ranger. He's found by the Native American Tonto, who becomes his friend. Together, the duo traverse around America to help the victims of crimes. The Lone Ranger became the symbol of justice in the Wild West. He joined the leagues of classic Western characters that Americans have always identified with. The first show launched in 1949. There were 78 episodes shown over 78 consecutive weeks. After this initial run, the entire 78 episodes were shown once more before new episodes were produced. Clayton Moore was the first actor who played the Lone Ranger, while John Hart played the role for one season. Jay Silverheels played the role of Tonto. The show and its 2 main characters soon became an embedded part of American pop culture. The rules for the Lone Ranger. It was clear Fran Stryker and George Trendle understood the impact the show and its characters had on the American public. As such, they crafted the character in such a way that he'd serve as a great role model for the audience. The Lone Ranger never used vulgar language, slang, or even improper grammar. He always wore a mask and never identified himself as being the Lone Ranger. If anyone did question his identity, he presented them with a silver bullet. He also never smoked or drank. While the Wild West was full of saloons where you could grab as many drinks as you pleased, they weren't the kinds of places where you'd find the Lone Ranger. The Lone Ranger also seldom fought against non-Americans. In a rare event he battled someone foreign, the scripts didn't include the character's surname. In many cases, the villains would get called by a nickname. This was perhaps to avoid upsetting foreign cultures or minorities. It was also one of the rare shows that had a Native American character in a lead role. The show was truly groundbreaking. Before we had popular westerns like Gunsmoke or Bonanza, we had The Lone Ranger. This was the TV show that proved Americans wanted to watch westerns each week on their TV. The western wasn't just to be confined to the radio, comics, or cinema. What about Tonto? While the Lone Ranger may have been the main hero, one can't help but appreciate the heroism of his sidekick Tonto as well. Tonto first appeared in the Lone Ranger radio series. He made his first appearance in the 11th episode, and his existence was solely so that the Lone Ranger could talk to another character regularly. But it was clear Tonto was destined to become a more integral character to the stories. Tonto spoke English as his second language and often referred to the Lone Ranger as Kimosabi, which translates to faithful friend. It should be noted the name Tonto means wild one. However, this unique and rather cool-sounding name isn't so flattering in Spanish. In Spanish, Tonto is often translated as stupid. As such, Tonto was renamed Toro in Spanish-speaking regions. While Tonto is often seen as the sidekick, the stories were told from his perspective in the 2013 film The Lone Ranger. Johnny Depp played Tonto, while Armie Hammer played the Lone Ranger. Who inspired the Lone Ranger? One question fans of the Lone Ranger have wanted to know for years is who exactly, if anyone, was the Lone Ranger based on? Or is he truly a fictitious character? Well, there isn't a consensus on who the Lone Ranger character was based on. The two most common beliefs are he was based on a famous Texas rancher named Captain John R. Hughes. There's also a belief he was based on Bass Reeves, a famous black U.S. deputy marshal. There's also a school of thought that believes the Lone Ranger was based on Robin Hood or Zorro. The Lone Ranger's legacy. How big of a hit was the Lone Ranger TV series? The ABC network, which aired the Lone Ranger, found one of its biggest hits with the Lone Ranger. While it first aired in 1949, it became one of the most popular TV shows of the 50s. The theme song remains one of the most popular and recognizable theme songs in American TV history. The song is March of the Swiss Soldiers by Gioacchino Rossini. The theme song has been sporadically used in other productions, including a Mickey Mouse cartoon called The Band Concert. The character of the Lone Ranger was so popular that actor Clayton Moore would make public and TV appearances playing the character even after the show ended. In fact, it's almost as if Clayton was born to play the role. He embodied it and could appear as the Lone Ranger even when the camera wasn't rolling. He clearly loved the character and was passionate about the show. While he was replaced by John Hart for one season, he came back and played the character until the show ended. The Lone Ranger also had many incarnations in films, with the 2013 film being the most recent addition to the series. Today, the Lone Ranger remains one of the classic American TV shows. The character is also an icon of Americana, and Clayton Moore especially deserves to be recognized as one of the classic Western actors, alongside John Wayne, Alan Ladd, Gary Cooper, and Clint Eastwood. Now it's time to hear from you. Do you feel the show still holds up today, or do we need to update it for newer audiences? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.